Okay, good morning. This is Dr. B. It is Thursday, the 13th, I'm sorry. And as promised from yesterday's video, hopefully you've seen that already. This is the content video. Yesterday's was the assignment video and a few other doodads here and there. And that's how I intend to move things forward for the balance of the semester, which is rapidly coming to an end. He frowned. Maybe you smile because you're happy to have another course under your collective belts as you move forward through your program. But I always get a little wistful when I know that I'm getting toward the end because I know there's a million things I wish I had done with you that I have not yet done. So enough said. So this one is speeding it to death. We're ready to go. We have a content. This is the content video, and so I'm going to share the same. Bring up the same agenda, yes, as you had yesterday. And here you go. I'm not sure if you see it yet. No, you don't. And there it is. For some reason, it's too big. Let me see if I can squeeze this down a little bit. That works for me. All right. My little old eyes can take a look at that. And as I said in yesterday's video, here it is. The agenda always looks very similar, I know, but there are differences, and that's up to you to take the time to show yourself that you have seen the differences. A couple of things I'm changing along this way just to keep everything uniform. Bear with me on this. So you can see there's already the video link is not up on this one, but it is in the module. I promise you, I swear. The video link is in the module, so the latest module. In case there's a problem with that, you can't find that, you only need to let me know. All right, so again, those are those different videos I'm about to take off, I think. I think I will take them off. We don't need to see them anymore either, do we? Let's clean this up a little bit. And I'm pointing out that you have a new discussion question this time around. And this one is about what obstacles you think you see. Let's even color that a little bit differently so you can see there's some sort of difference there. What are the yes buts? I'm not going to get into that specifically. I spoke about this pretty extensively yesterday, gave some examples. And essentially is what could go wrong? You have a strategy you think will work. What could go wrong? Something can go wrong. If you haven't futured for that, there's that word again that you'll hear more about starting next week. If you haven't futured for it and something goes south, you haven't planned for it. And there's a million examples of that, and we'll come back to that up the road. So again, the discussion assignment was to take the same strategy you've been working through as your draft, and use that now to try to identify what I call the yes buts, or the obstacles that you need to take care of as such. And I'll give you feedback about that along the way. Not everybody's posting these discussions, I've noticed, and that's troublesome to me. If you're having a problem with something or another, sometimes people do it, let me know. There's also a journal question, and I'm going to skip the parent engagement piece. Material I'm working from now is largely from KOSA Chapter 5. I've deliberately stopped with KOSA at 5. 6 is about instructional pieces, and I'll probably come back to that if I can figure out a way to make a move in. And it also reflects Fullen. It's also going to reflect a lot of other things that we've already mentioned, namely McREL. I like the Cynic, C-I-N-E-K video, the one I just erased from this agenda. I like it, but it's broad and it's more motivating than it is informative, I think, in certain respects. Whereas the McREL video is quite good as far as making some things clear. And there's some more videos beneath this that we're about to take a closer look at. I've gone over the final assignment umpteen times. I have a big announcement to make too that's going to make you, I know this will make you smile. Here's that template again. I'm just moving it through. And I am at housekeeping goals. I talked about this yesterday, but I want to reiterate it. So here it comes. Again, the final assignment is due by the last class. Now, the last class, I think technically is May 2nd. Semester ends May 5th. That's a Friday. So I'm going to give you till May 5th. This past May 5th, you need to let me know you're having an issue, and then we work that out. But I don't like to wait for our final assignments because that's how I complete the grades. I get a little antsy about getting my grades in a timely way. So certainly don't want to penalize anybody for handing it in late. I don't like to do that either. You're all adults with children and lives and other masters to serve. And I don't want to put myself at the end of the wagon train, but I do, or to be the caboose and the last thing you need to worry about. But I don't want you to break out in hives about it either. So to about the 5th, I'm not going to have a problem with that. After the 5th, I have a problem. I might have to give you an incomplete, which I really don't like to do, or I might have to penalize you for the grade. I know that grades are important to this group in terms of your own professional pride, which I totally respect. So the 5th is the due date. I've been giving you weeks of preparation for this in draft form, and I'm confident that you should do that. I will tell you, I'm talking too fast. I will tell you that you should begin to polish this chart off. Really, we're talking about get 5 strategies and then work away across the chart. All of those columns should be filled in. There's going to be an additional piece to that next week where I'm going to ask for some paragraphs, sort of a narration to fill the holes, to explain what your thinking was about. But I'll talk more about that next week. So begin polishing this assignment off. And you're going to be happy to know that I'm going to eliminate both case studies. I'm going to give you 1 instead of 2. I have decided to give you none. You have plenty of assignments. You've been doing journal assignments for me. You've been doing discussions, most of you, he smiled, regularly. And the case studies are not important. They're very important. In fact, what I'm going to do, I have to remember to do that. I'm going to put it here just so I remember that. I'm going to recommend a book to you next week. I'm not going to get into it today. I have mentioned it to a couple of you. To prepare you for the exam, and using the case study approach would be helpful to you. And I'll explain that better next week. So here are the content goals. The content goals are quite ambitious today. Doesn't look like much, but it's pretty ambitious, actually. I want to give you more change models. There's actually, when it comes to change theory, there are people with theories who have theories about theories who have theories about theories. I have theories about it, largely grounded to systems thinking and futuring. I feel strong feelings about it. I'll start to give you that Kool-Aid next week. Koza has theories of her own, or she synthesized some good things. And we all know what Fullen is thinking all the way along. And we probably reflect each other, all from different sorts of emphases. So Fullen might emphasize one thing more strongly than I might emphasize it versus how Koza might emphasize it. They give you 3 different people to look at. So what you need to do is be familiar with them, because if you don't already have one, and I don't think you should have one yet, it's premature in your own professional leadership development. But you have some unconscious ideas about what change should be like. You may not even admit to it or be aware of it, but you do. And what I'm trying to do is to tweak these a little bit more. And so there's 3 change models here to go through some more. And there's also a video about family engagement. I'm going to do that first, actually, because it's not particularly, I just want to point it out, it's not particularly specific to the topic in general. I have posted this for quite a few weeks, but have not spoken to it. So here it is. And let me point a few things out to you. You have the link in front of you. It's on the agenda. It's on several of the agendas. And I want to point out the group that's published this. This group is the NEA, the National Educational Association, the association for educators in the United States. Sometimes it competes with the UFT, I think it's called, United Federation of Teachers. But if I'm not mistaken, NEA is still the king or the queen, whichever way you want to look at it. And they put some good material out. And you should go to NEA.org and look for their things if you're looking for some ideas about most anything. At any rate, in this case, the NEA has put out a great publication about what's called community schools. And I'm just going to point it out. So I'm going to do. It's about, were there an assignment specific about family engagement? I'll come back to that. I would have referred you to this. I'm not going to read it at you, but I will propose a futures-based idea to you. And those of you who teach in the city are already aware of this. Those of us in the suburbs and around the country may not be. And that is the notion of community schools. I may have mentioned that is not Ornish, not Cornish either. Oh boy, Toffler to you before, Alvin Toffler. And he and his wife wrote a book in 1961, I believe, called Future Shock, which I've spoken about a couple of videos back, that pointed out that the future is accelerating so rapidly that we're having trouble staying up with it. And this is again 50, 60 years ago. And it's becoming so rapid that people are in shock. And what's happening is you see an increase in suicide rates, in crime, in divisions among groups, in drug addiction. And I'm only naming a few of the issues that are associated with this, unfortunately. And unfortunately, he was correct, very much so. And this came out of Disney, as I was telling you yesterday. Every time I go to Disney, they change something technological. I'm actually literally online now trying to break into something. And they change the technology approaches to do the different pieces. And all they do is make folks more crazy, because a lot of times their technology infrastructure can't keep up with their own changes. That's bad futuring. And self-defeating futuring to a large extent. So at any rate, when I'm driving at this, the issues that you see as far as education is concerned, Toffler has a famous quote about it, where he said that schools face backward to an industrial age that no longer exists, instead of facing forward to a post-industrial age. And that is true. I haven't got time to explain it in today's video, but I'll explain that better next week. And the emerging future is a future that we can scarcely keep up with around the world and within our own country. And we are all painfully aware of some of the negatives associated with it, as well as many of the positives. So, and it's not just about technology, folks. That's probably the best example of it. And since Toffler is correct about this post-industrial age future shock that's concerned, organizations, institutions that can begin to face forward are the ones we can count on. And in certain senses, community schools is a great example of a futures-based school. It's not a great example, but it's an interesting example. And our futures-based school is largely personified by community schools. A school nowadays is not just a place where children go from 9 to 3, whatever the time frame may be. Through great. And again, the Barbacosa book is a great example of adjustments that some schools, not too many, but some schools are making to go back to an old model of schooling called a multi-age school. We talked about that enough times, and Dr. Koza did a great enough job with that for us to recognize how it might even help ENL children. Hopefully it will. I think that it would. But a community school no longer just educates. A community school is the center of the community. In some respects, hear this, is the last remaining recognizable social institution from your own growing up, in your own sense of consciousness of the world around you. Now schools are medical centers, health centers, rehabilitation centers, counseling centers, things that it wasn't always prepared to do, have now become part of what a community school is. Some schools are open 24/7 to service the needs of the community. And this NEA approach, we're going to point here, a home away from home. This NEA approach is a great way to look at this. I'm not going to read this at you. This is good material. Good material. And you should be paying attention to this and keep your antenna up for how you see things, maybe developing among yourselves. So with that, I'm not ignoring this. I'm just moving it forward because I want to point out to you there's a source here that you should take advantage of. Now, to come back to the agenda, I'm also going to skip down to Wohlstetter. Now, we talked about Wohlstetter many moons ago. We said that Wohlstetter has something called the high engagement model. And you can see how this reflects. I use the word model, I use that as an example. Somebody that a school leader and her stakeholders take to adapt to their own needs. Doesn't mean you have to follow it word for word like a recipe book. 2 teaspoons of this and 12 teaspoons of that. No, but it is a model that you adapt as according to how you situationally recognize your leadership responsibilities. However, and I mentioned this before, Wohlstetter is professor at Columbia University now, but before that, she was the head of the school governance center in UCLA, where she and some other professors developed this, what we call high engagement model. It was based on Australia, believe it or not, but I won't bore you with that for now. And what she identified particularly is 6 variables. I have spoken about these before. I'm not going to belabor them. Here they are again. Where she said that in order for a school to be highly engaged, or a community to be highly engaged for that matter, we're talking about change issues. We're talking about the idea of knowing what their power boundaries are. We've talked about this. Having the knowledge about how a school system should be running, or how a community center, in this case, should be operating. If they don't know what that's about, it's pretty hard to have one, isn't it? And as it would be for any new change. Okay, another piece of the knowledge piece, I'm going to just put this in here, although it's not specifically in the model, is they need to know how to get along with each other. They need to know how to relate. All kinds of research about this, about how relationships drive strong organizations. I'm going to give you one name, and they can take a look at it if you have interest in this. Those of you who are going to go forward with dissertations, this is a good person to examine. Anthony Bryk, B-R-Y-K. We did a lot of studies at the Chicago inner city schools. And basically what he found was that the inner city schools in Chicago, the ones that were successful, and there were successful ones, were ones with high relationship among each other, where people connected with each other, listened to each other, trusted each other, worked together, collaborated, cooperated, collaborated, worked together as such. And so it's not just a matter of knowing, where the screwdrivers are, where the rules are in terms of educating kids. It's also a matter of learning how to relate among people so that they're willing to work with each other. sometimes I use athletic teams as an example, and they're not always the best examples. And I'm not a hockey person, but in the middle of the night last night when I couldn't sleep, I was watching the Rangers against not the Rangers, the Islanders against the Penguins. And I know about this much about hockey, but I'm trying to know more about it. But when you watch a basketball team or a hockey team, particularly, to some extent, a football team, and I think to a lesser extent, baseball, because baseball is largely individual, more than you realize. They are a team, certainly. But there's individual people have to step at individual times in baseball. Or in basketball and in hockey, they're all moving. Everybody's moving. And you know what? Everybody knows where everybody else is. And they're thinking with each other. I mean, with some sort of a hockey ESP or something. It's kind of crazy to watch. And they're skating to where the puck's going to be, not to where it is. And that's about relationships. So let's come back to high engagement model. Wallstetter talks about power, knowledge. These things have to be there. Information. I'm going to add to this too. Information as in data. Data sometimes is a dirty four-letter word to people, but doesn't have to be. We talked about this before. The more qualitative and quantitative data we have, the more nearly we can make good decisions against the culture that the organization represents. And with that, we're going to add another piece, and that would be the need to know how to communicate this information among each other and to listen to each other. Something I was sometimes guilty of not doing. I'm willing to admit to once in a while. Yeah, those are the three big ones. These three pieces are the big issues. You need to sort of take the pulse of your own school and say, we know our power boundaries. We have the knowledge to work together and to make our school work for all children, particularly in your case is ENL. We have all the data we need to make the right kinds of decisions. And do we communicate among each other as well as back out to the general education faculty, so to speak. So with that, we'll go over to what I call the less strong factors is the better way to look at it. One would be that they have SMART goals. And SMART, the acronym SMART is something I think you learn day one in most school teacher preparation programs. You have to have goals, number one, and they have to be developed together through the collaborative prospect we spoke about above, and it has to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and with targets. Enough said. We should have as well, and this is a hard one sometimes to understand. I'm going to use a fancy word with you here. Distributed leadership. Sometimes ad hoc leadership is another way to call it. What that means is that the principal can't do everything. Principal has to know whom she can rely on to help her get the job done, to collaborate with her or with each other to get the job done. A good principal turns to Mrs. Smith, the first grade teacher, and says, can you help me do the science fair? Anyone have any idea about how to make this technology work so we all can make it happen together? We have ENL population growing by leaps and bounds. What do we need to know about this? Okay. ENL teacher, can you maybe come up with a way to distribute some information to us or to make presentations to us? That's distributed information. If everyone looks at the principal as the only who has a monopoly on all power, who has a monopoly on all knowledge, a monopoly on the energy, he smiled, to get all these things done, it's a loser. The smart leaders creates a culture where people want to contribute with each other. Easier said than done sometimes, especially to make a change happen, but that's got to be present if you have a distributed leadership system of some kind, an informal one as such. Now, these last two are the weakest, but I will give them to you, and it's going to surprise you, actually. Do you have the resources? And I hear this is a lot, especially out of city systems. but I will stay with it anyway. We don't have enough money. No, you don't. And I'm going to shock you by saying but you probably have more money than you think that you do if you figure out ways to reslice the pizza pie. That's controversial. I know. It's called discretionary income. You do have money to spend. Sometimes you spend it on things that are priorities for one person rather than for the whole with a W. This is a high school example. Daughter works in a school where she's a speech pathologist, been there for many years, very effective. And they just found out they're going to eliminate all the speech teachers in the high school and make sure they keep the football team. They're going to slide the senior speech pathology teacher, she being one of them, down to an elementary school. And she's going to be fine there. It's actually probably easier to teach the elementary babies than it is to work with these severely delayed kids up in the high school. What are they doing to the high school, to the severely delayed kids? That's a matter of priorities. That's a cultural issue. And what it is a competition for resources. And as far as resources are concerned, if you want to get something done, you might not need money, but you might need time. That's always an issue. And that should be something you should put into that column about resources needed. And you might need experts, the E&L person, persons, a special ed teacher, a speech pathologist. Sometimes it's a custodian. You need to be able to tap into the resources that you have. I have a great example of a custodian I didn't get along with really well. We were going to do a science fair. Those days we did science fairs. We were going to put it on in the cafeteria. We had a huge cafeteria, and it was going to be all grades. And we were going to set up tables and have students, do all kinds of presentations. The kids are really charged up about it, and the teachers weren't as strong about it, but they got into it as we moved along. And the custodian came to a meeting and said, "It ain't going to work." I said, "What do you mean, Phil?" And he says, "I'm telling you, it ain't going to work." I said, "Tell me why." He says, "We haven't got enough electricity to plug in to have all these things work." Duh. Did Bernardo think of that? No. He needed the collaboration of the custodian to point that out, and we worked it out. Wasn't as though we bought in batteries and so forth, but we worked it out because we needed his expertise. Someone would have, otherwise we would have, had a lot of power failures that night. They went quite well. The last thing is is the weakest variable. But I'm going to point it out because I know personally I relate to this, whether I like it or not. There should be a reward system built in. Now, take this whole model and put it into the Google world. So you're working for Google. Mr. and Mrs. Google want to make a profit. They're not that altruistic. They want to make a profit. So if you come in with the world's greatest idea about Google Maps or something like on that scale, if you create a Google Maps, you're going to get a nice raise and a promotion. If you come in with some of the ideas that failed, and there are ideas that failed, I don't remember what they are, but there are ones. I can think of Apple. When Apple came in with something called some computer way back in the beginning, Steve Jobs came up with it. It's named after an artist. Utter failure. Guess what happened to Steve Jobs then? He got fired. So because in the business world, the private world, reward systems are much more concrete, economic, to some extent recognition, but much less of that. In schools, you don't get a raise if your kids do better. Neither do you get a reduction in pay if your kids don't. The reverse of that. It's basic reward system that the research generates as far as rewards for education or nonprofits is feeling good about helping kids, about getting people to cooperate and collaborate. But it is the weakest one by far. That's why I highlighted these three. Now you can see, I hope, how this high engagement model intersects with this family engagement piece that the NEA speaks to, as well as what Dr. Kozer wrote up in pieces of Chapter 7. And I'll refer to some of this again, starting next week in a different way. And what I want to do is point out quickly these two more theorists, and one is more nearly an idea. The first one is Kurt, K-U-R-T, Lewin, L-E-W-I-N. Any course you take, I'm suspecting you've already heard the man's name. It somehow always comes around to Lewin. Now, Lewin was not an educator. Lewin was a sociologist, I believe. By the way, all educators, especially principals and chairs, are sociologists because you're studying people. Don't forget that for a minute. But Lewin was not specifically an educator. He was a sociologist. And he came up with this theory about change. It's deceptively simple. This is a 4-minute video, and I'm going to show it to you briefly.
Okay, so I heard about this blades trend, so I snagged some from our place. These are the midi bowls, and I'm officially a... Welcome to Practical Psychology. In this video, you'll learn about Lewin's change theory, which looks at the way that we behave and change in organizations. Let's get started. It seems like every school in psychology has some sort of father. Freud is considered the father of psychoanalysis. John B. Watson is considered the father of behaviorism. And if you've watched any of our previous videos on Kurt Lewin, you may know that he is considered the father of social psychology. What specifically is Lewin's change theory? Kurt Lewin shares a specific model of change called the unfreeze change freeze model. Lewin's change theory is one of the social psychologist's most important contributions to the field. Two building blocks of Lewin's change theory are driving and resisting forces. Lewin believed that all behavior was a dynamic balance of forces that moved in one of two directions. Driving forces drove people towards change, and resisting forces prevented them from making the change. If driving forces were stronger than resisting forces, change could occur. If both driving and resisting forces were equal, behavior stood at an equilibrium. Change does not occur here either. In order to change behavior, you had to address driving and restraining forces. Lewin proposed a model for implementing long-lasting change called unfreeze, change, refreeze model. In order to understand this model, you'll need to think of a block of ice. Let's say that you have a big cube of ice. You want to change the ice into a big cone of ice. How do you do so without changing the amount of ice that you have? One way to do so is to unfreeze, change, and refreeze the ice. Once the ice is melted into water, you can transfer it to a mold that looks like a cone and refreeze it to its new shape. When this model is applied to an organization, such as a business, charity, or educational institution, you probably won't have to worry about freezing or melting. But similarly, you have to melt the entire structure to its core before implementing changes and setting the organization up for a new structure. This is why the model is still in use today. By analyzing the thoughts, feelings, and values that are behind current practices, you can implement change in a positive way. Upper management
Hear that? That's a great point. In other words, to understand the forces at play, the forces that drive and the forces that resist, and so forth, you need to unfreeze them by trying to get down to their bottom line issues. How you get to the root causes. You need to do. Hello, do I hear the word needs assessment? You sure do.
May have to direct the organization's thoughts by sharing their own thoughts, feelings, and values that enforce the change. But once this is done, everyone will be on board and each person will be more likely to gravitate toward change. Let's go through each of the 3 steps in Lewin's change model. The first step is to unfreeze. Lewin believed that you could approach the unfreezing process through one of 3 ways. The first is to ramp up driving forces that direct behavior toward the intended change. The second is to slow down the resisting forces that are encouraging people to cling to the status quo. And the third is to use a combination of both to move the equilibrium toward change.
Okay, I froze it in the wrong slide, but that's pretty clever if you think about it.
Before you choose a path to take, you will need to evaluate the situation at hand. Understanding driving and restraining forces requires an understanding of an organization's core values and beliefs. In some cases, the organization must go through a process of unlearning. This unlearning goes deep. After all, the decisions that have been made up to this point rest on the core beliefs and values of the organization. What values are supporting the old method? How do they contribute to harmful or outdated practices in the state that you are in today? People at the highest levels of an organization must understand what needs to be unfrozen before the true unfreezing can happen. Once a set plan is in place,
must understand what needs to be unfrozen, the deep issues, the root causes at play.
Communication must happen. Everyone throughout the organization must be on the same page about why a change needs to be made and what.
That's the hard part. Everyone has to be on the same page. Requires a lot of dialogue, exchange, hashing and hacking around. It can be done with the good leaders and the good and with the culture of exchange.
What beliefs, values, or processes must be replaced? There will likely be a pushback to change, which is why upper management must
That's a yes, but there will be a pushback.
have a solid plan and motivation for change. A thorough understanding of both the driving and restraining forces within the organization will also help management prepare for any pushback and to plan for ways to increase driving forces toward change. Secondly, then, the change process adjusts an organization's behavior, thoughts, and feelings. Once a clear plan is in place, it must be communicated and the change must start rolling out. This change must be swift. Think about jumping in a pool of cold water. You have to dive in so the adjustment will be painless. Walking into the pool slowly will be a painful and much longer process. Everyone must make that dive in order for the whole organization to change and adjust. This means that upper management should not only communicate the benefits of change to the organization, but they should also involve each and every member in the change process.
Also involve each and every member.
Everyone should be able to communicate the why and how behind the change. Last but not least is the refreeze stage. This stage is crucial for determining how long the change lasts throughout the organization. If you are looking for a permanent change, you will have to put practices in place that cement the changes into the minds and behaviors of the organization. This could involve changing handbooks, contracts, or training materials so future members of the organization move forward with the changes. Maybe you focus on the members you have. It might be time to pull from our behaviorist friends. Positive reinforcement of change can help it stick. For example, let's say you want to encourage your team to show up to team building events. There are many ways to go about this change, providing incentives, mandating team building events, or setting up campaigns that encourage team bonding will help. But we can look at this example too through the lens of Lewin's change theory. In the unfreeze phase, you may ramp up driving forces by evaluating both your core values and when your team building events are taking place. If your team tends to consist of parents who value spending time with family, they're not going to want to skip dinner time for team building. Considering everyone's schedule or sending out a survey asking for the best time to have events might be a great first step to making this change. Then we get to the change phase. You have to communicate with your team that this survey was sent out so that team building events could be easier to attend. Speak to your core values. How will team cohesion and bonding help you reach your goals? And speak to who you are as a company. How will these events benefit all the people who you want to attend? Last is the refreeze phase. When your team members show up to the event, reward them. Share photos of how much fun you are having and make a point to schedule the next few events immediately so
That's a little bit of a meh to me. I think that needs a little more love, but the premise I think speaks well enough for you to recognize the process as such. To me, this is a little superficial on this side of the equation. And remember, the key word in effecting change is to sustain it. That is to say, you rebuild the systems to assure that the change that you wanted doesn't fizz away the minute somehow, whether it's threatened somehow or something goes sour that we weren't prepared to do. Again, how you handle the yes buts. So with that, I'm going to come out of this particular video. This is a very valuable video for you to keep in mind because it really, I think, speaks well to the unfreeze part particularly. So with that, we'll go back to the videos I wanted you to look at. I'm going to skip over futuring for a moment and go to the Kotter one. I'm not going to go through all of this. It's a little longer.
Magic never leaves you when you stay with the Disney Resorts Collection, following you along everywhere you go.
I was just
making
there.
every moment
I
special.
wish I were there now.
Even more is one of the most widely recognized models for change management. John P. Kotter is a retired Harvard Business School professor of leadership. Kotter is also a co-founder of Kotter International, based in Seattle and Boston. Kotter's article.
I'm going to stop here. You have to watch this on your own. It's 20 minutes long. I don't always agree with all of this either, but here's how he looks at it. Forgive me for reading at you. establish a sense of urgency. Okay, hey, there's a need. Not everybody necessarily perceives the need. Forming a powerful guiding coalition, that is to say, bringing in a cross section of stakeholders to support what you're taking with this. Creating a vision, in my mind, I suppose that's the third step in my own view, but there's steps in between that. Difficult to create a vision. People thinking you snap your finger at a meeting and suddenly you have a vision. It's not nearly as easy as that. And I'm going to explain that better next week. Communicating, it goes back to the Wellstetter model we spoke about a few minutes ago. Empowering, good point here. Number 5 is a strong one. Empowering others to act on the vision. And then 7, which would be, I'm sorry, preparing for creating, I'm talking too fast. Preparing for and creating short-term wins is an important point. That's a political point, but it's an important point. When you show, hey, this happened, it worked. And then encourages people to try to get their teeth deeper into the leg of what the action, the change in actions may have been. That brings us over to consolidating improvements to continuously reform and improve what the original change issues or actions may have been. There's a saying, it's not mine. Pat Riley was a coach of the Knicks for a little while, and also of the Lakers, and I think of Miami, who said, and he wasn't the only person who said this. And when you stop trying to get better, you stop being good. Which is to say, you pay attention, you take the pulse of what's going on in order for you to understand what needs to be done to continue to improve the winning ways, so to speak. And then somehow institutionalizing that makes me a little nervous, but really what we're talking about there is what you're doing in your assignment when you're coming up with an action plan. And again, your action plan is not a perfect template. I know that. So I'm just trying to get those muscles started, as I say to you every week, to work that through. And the rest of it is a great job. I just don't want to spend the time here with you that you can do on your own. I do recommend strongly that you look at it, particularly if you're having trouble pulling together your strategies. Now you have 2 more theories. You have Lewin, and you have Arcata, and you have McQuell. You have Koza, and you're going to have some Bernardo next week too. He smiled, so you'll have a nice toolkit to work through. So with that, I think we've covered the agenda pretty well, and I'll call it a day. And again, if anybody has any kind of problems at all, call me, email me, FaceTime me, TomToms, tin cans and string, message in a bottle, find me, and I'll be happy to talk to you. Those of you who have done that know that I'm more than willing to do that. I forgot one thing. I knew I forgot one thing. Give me a second. I knew I forgot one thing. Two things, actually. I forgot one of them already. Oh, I forgot to do the featuring video. All right, that you can watch on your own. I'll be coming back to that next week anyway. No, it's not on here. For some reason, it's not. Oh, here it is. I mentioned this yesterday. I want to re-mention it. I've also sent you all an invitation. Next Wednesday at 6 o'clock, I'm going to have a volunteer optional, he shouted, online extra help class. For some reason I can't bring up. Here it is here, a volunteer extra help class. Strictly about the action plan design. I'll get online if you'd like to hear, well, whoever, depending on how many people show up, It's only an hour long. I'll get online to talk to you about what help you get over any humps that you need to may have encountered. Okay, you don't have to come. I'm going to record it. You don't have to come. I'm going to record it. If you have some sort of conflict with the rest of your life, I get that. Just trying to help everybody as much as I can, and that's the purpose of it. That's what it's about. What I would like is to have you email me to tell me that you will be there, that you have an invitation already in an email from me. So if you intend to come, please tell me if you intend to come. If no one's coming, I'm not going online. Okay? If no one is coming, I don't get an email, I won't go online. One person is coming, I'll go online. But if I don't hear from anyone, that means you don't think you need the extra help, and that makes me feel very confident that you feel comfortable with getting the job done. So with that, I think we've got everything covered today. I know it's a little later in the week than usual, but for the Easter week and the Monday and my own life, it slowed me down a little bit today, this week. But now we're caught up. Take care, and I hope to hear from you about whether you're going to take my invitation down the line.